Hello, it's Detangler here with Activator for your daily Detangler. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Hi,
Hello.
everyone.
Let's talk about creating shared understanding. And what I thought I'd do is pass it over to you, Activator, because this came from a request from Catalyst on a discussion that we had that I had with Clarity when I was talking through with him and trying to figure out how to make things clear. So this is, do you want to set us up? A little bit of background information for our listeners?
There have been a couple of things we've reacted to and how we've ended up here. So you and Walter made a video yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, reacting or doing one of these special detanglers also, where you were interviewing about your detangler, the process that you follow as you mapped it out when you do your detanglers, which we can possibly touch on that later through this process. But so that happened. And then the ask from Catalyst was that we do, you and I, as activator and detangler, do a daily detangler talking about, as you said, the collaboration. And so let me share my screen real quick, if that's okay. There you go. Thank you. So we're going to try to use three things during this call. Number one is our orb, which you have up on the screen there. I want to try to tie that orb to things as we go, and this process that we're following, right? Is he clear? Was he clear? Where does what was where maybe were people, information, technology, and process? My biggest takeaway right now, Brian, is that this is not a linear thing. This orb, it's very three-dimensional. You're sort of flowing around. So with that in mind, there was a video yesterday that Catalyst put out there that I also wanted us to just see if we could start out and improv a little bit around. How do you feel about that? I improv with me?
Yeah, and I think
cool.
when you look at,
oh no,
yeah, actually, let me use the orb too. Let me improv on the orb too.
Go for it.
So I was just taking notes here as you were talking to help our listeners.
Awesome.
So Clarity and Detangler did one. Now you and I are here today, so there's the people involved. The first Detangler with Clarity, I was talking about and answering his questions about the process I went through. And then we flipped it and we reversed it. And in that reversing of, hey, am I clear? We actually used a website. We went to the Scientific Methods site. So I'm going to put on here another thing that we did, which was we used the Scientific Methods
site
Thank you.
information. It's a big part of it, right? Like tying in the scientific methods to what we're...
Yeah, and the microsite. So we'll share that here in a little bit. I actually thought we could cue that up and just show that interaction where we were exchanging information about encoding and decoding and transmitting, right?
Perfect.
Encode, transmit, decode. I could show that as part of this detangler, and then how we're using technology there is we went to the microsite. And then the process that we're using here on this call is, we're trying to follow the idea of what's the setup for the rules, and are we using the orb? Are we using the orb as part of the rules of collaboration? And this idea of creating shared understanding is what this detangler is about. So we literally jumped in, and now we're working to try to meet our listeners halfway with the hope of creating shared understanding with them, because there's so much going on. So I don't know how we're doing on that so far.
So much going on. No, you set me up perfectly. May I share my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I love how you set that up. So shared understanding, that's the theme. Shared understanding, that's what we're trying to we're role playing toward right now, right? For what you said. So
yes,
we have a couple of little things here. Let's just kick this off with our rules of improv. Ready?
Yes.
All right, so awesome. Saying yes and, adding new information, not blocking, avoiding asking questions. But the important thing about this one is, of course, we can ask questions, right? But we want to make sure that we're asking questions to add info or to help to add info to each other. So that's easy enough. That's what we do anyway. Play in the present, use the moment, establish our location, which in a second, this is a little bit, this is the setting in improv. And we kind of just did that already, which is great. We'll kind of keep coming back to that anchor of being specific, providing colorful details, and adapting to change. All right, so I have this little whiteboard here of our orb, people, process, information, and technology. This is the other piece, detangler, that I wanted us to try to improv around. This video yesterday where Catalyst introduced this model right here, just for us to beat up, try out. I've never used it before, have you?
No, but because it's actually being synthesized from a couple of elephant in the room things, which is change, right? Our change bridge, he's synthesizing that into the relationship rhythm kind of thing, which is the kind of the 4 quadrants, plus the systems thinking, and remember the innovate versus operate kind of view. He's synthesizing that. I see that. And then I also see this idea that Kinefin model, or whatever it's called, from Sweden. The Swedish model, or the Nordic Kinefin model, synthesizing that into this thing. And then also I will bring in, yes-anding your comments here, that you actually had a discussion with Conceptor where you guys were talking through the detangler clarity discussion as well. And I'd like to reference that, where you were talking about, and Conceptor was talking about, kind of the usability of a website, a microsite, to talk through concepts.
Yes.
So we're bringing that in here. Right. So what else do you think we're synthesizing with this?
You said a lot of things and I wasn't writing, and I'm actually proud. so let me make sure I got everything you said there.
Yeah, the relationship rhythms, the operate versus innovate, the scientific foundations, obviously the orb, but we're also, there's the system thinking, right? There's kind of the doing versus orchestrating an ecosystem view. And then there's the, he has the idea of adaptations, which is I would say that the change curve, right? The 3-act change curve, and how do we adapt on that journey, because change is constantly happening. And then there's the learning by doing, right? We're learning by doing. Of course.
Isn't that what we're doing right now?
Yeah. So I'm adding those two. Those were new ads because you asked me to do it again.
Yes. What did I miss here? I was typing.
Oh, doing versus orchestrating, like.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think what I was also bringing in with the conceptor thing was, there's a usability of what we're doing, and because we're creating shared understanding, right? The purpose of this detangler is we're sifting through touch points that people may have had as they listen, and we're trying to connect the dots to try to meet them halfway to create a shared understanding, right? That's what I'm trying to do here. And so the concept or discussion about the usability of the website actually transfers over to the usability of this whiteboard deck, right? Look how you're using this whiteboard deck to help us create shared understanding, for example.
Gotcha.
So that's another thing that's happening.
So let me put just UI down here at the bottom. With that,
user experience, or just UI is fine. UX. But as far as the model itself, do you want to give it a shot? Or do you say what you see about the model? Of course I do. let me hit, I'm going to hit the one thing that resonates for me, and then I'm excited to hear your take, because I feel like there are a lot of dots that you can help connect as well here for me. But here's what I took away and what I'm seeing with this thing for our purpose and what we're trying to do just right now, and using this model. If we kick off with, hey, Brian, what see, I already messed up the word. What rhythm would you say that we're in right now and that we want to stay with throughout this? Are we in an accommodative rhythm, responsive rhythm, performance, prescriptive? Both. Where do we want to be would be my first question. Yeah, I think to build up, so yes, I would say we're probably in a responsive stance because we're responding to
Okay,
catalysts asked, and we're trying to bring people around to have a shared understanding. I
that
think
makes
where we
sense.
want to be is more organic and performance driven. And obviously, we would have been more proactive and done this without him asking at some point on the journey.
Of
Uh,
course,
I
yes.
also think if you play the tape back, we could use this just to build off of that concept. There's the moment in time right now, but we could go back and play the tape of what Clarity and I were doing, and what were we trying to do there on the microsite that has now 3, 4 conversations that people are unpacking. So we could
Mm-hmm.
use this to say, okay, well, what were we trying to discuss there? So when we were when Clarity and I were discussing this idea of encoding, transmitting, and decoding, what quadrant were we trying to problem solve, right? Because that led to, let's go to the microsite. That's not an easy concept, this idea of who's transmitting and encoding and decoding. It's not a simple discussion. Let's go to the microsite and use a visual to have a more, I don't know, organic, using the right side, more of an organic discussion about
Sure,
what we
yeah,
see.
yeah.
So there's using it now, and then there's using it back. I think those are two different use cases of maybe where this model plays out, where right now you and I are more in a responsive, but we're trying to unpack Clarity and I talking about the top right quadrant, where there's a lot of, I guess, complexity of communicating.
So I just realized that the whiteboard space runs out eventually. That's something to think about later. I wanted this to be one big one. So what I heard you say was, as you're looking at this, I'm gonna replay back what I heard. You just fix it for me, whatever. I through my own words, right? That
Sure.
when you and Clarity did your kind of did what you were doing, which was talking about something and then using, you shifted into using the scientific foundation site in order to get to a shared understanding. That's kind of the using it then, and then it shifted into using it now, which is kind of what we're doing here. So, so let me just play off that. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think now you and I are in a responsive, but back then Walter and I were in a more of a top right, I guess, performance discussion.
Okay.
We were trying to figure out how we tackle complexity in our communications, et cetera. What does clarity mean in the top right quadrant? So we went to the microsite. So that's two ways to use this here. Is there's two different situations. And you know, there's.
So you're saying you went from top left to top right?
I think, well, you and I are in a bottom left, and then Walter and I were in a top right.
Oh, you're top right. Did you move?
Yeah.
Do you think you moved from anything? Like, did you start in the top right and stay there with Walter?
Yeah, I think we tried to stay there because that's how we ended up on the microsite, as we were trying to talk about something complex. We were in the detangler talking about, you know, this idea that I go through this I went through 80 different, you know, detanglers, and in the detangler build, I'm just looking for my sheet here that I held up in the
Yep.
section. You know,
I showed your architecture. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had 4 or 5 versions of this. The reason why I have this is it's more complex to do a daily detangler now, because I'm trying to synthesize, like we are here, a lot of things. So we started out in a responsive situation, and now you and I are starting to move into more of a performance discussion, maybe a top right together, by using a tool like this to move us to the top right, because there are a lot of variables that I wanted to bring up in the context of trying to drive clarity and shared understanding. You know, like for example, the whole discussion about how to use a microsite and why a microsite and why those visuals, where you and Concept were talking about the usability of the website, I was wanting to talk about the model itself and how that created shared understanding. You brought up the orb here, and now you're bringing up this change adaptation 2x2. It'd be really hard to have this conversation and bring people along into a shared understanding if we didn't have these visuals on the screen. Like, could you imagine if we didn't use any of these visuals at all?
No, I mean, it's so much faster. You're right. I mean, what you're saying is super true, and we're seeing it happen right here. Just having these visuals to be able to speak to and look at is probably just cut 5 minutes to 10 to 40 minutes off of our conversation, right?
Yeah, and I think it allows us to move and do this adaptation thing, which is I'm big on. As a detangler lens, is we get out of the bottom left where it's easy and transactional and
taskish, right?
It's task oriented and let's just get this over with, to we can actually attempt to have a conversation in the top right, whereas before we could really have that without shared understanding. We're adapting our conversation, and hopefully we're bringing people along. If you know, as they were listening, it was probably a little bit rough at first. We were focused on how do we bring wide perspectives of everybody listening into a shared understanding so that we could move them forward, right? That's what we're trying to do with the orb. That's what we're trying to do with the whiteboard. That's what we're trying to do with eventually when we end up at the microsite, is how do we bring people along and engage in a organic conversation that's structured type of thing.
So just so you know what I'm doing on the screen here, so you don't panic, and you tell me, because this is all just practice right now. So I'm trying to make like a second little whiteboard that we can continue talking about here with just this and get rid of my marks. My marks are still there. We'll have to get some, there's a lot of things we're practicing synthesizing right now. I think is really cool. It's like even just using this deck and how it works for us. And then of course talking about but that's what I'm doing here. So
yeah,
you were saying that you want to lean into, or you're leaning a lot into this idea of adaptation. Let's stick there for a second, because I'm really interested. I'm really interested in that right now as well. So can you elaborate a little bit more on what you're talking?
And actually we'll connect the dots. Let me what I'm seeing here, because I'm going to actually show the screen, the part where I went. So we're going to go back in time. Clarity and I went into the microsite. So let me share where we went in, because we adapted. We were in a conversation and we were trying to get clear. Here is a physical, audible. We're at 10 minutes in of our 20 minutes. So we're literally about halfway in, where we had this discussion, and maybe it was in a top left or a bottom left conversation. It doesn't really matter, but we're now going to shift and go, on the right side, and we're going to use the microsite to make the shift, right? So connecting the dots. You and I moved from left to right, I think, as we started this detangler. In the clarity call, we moved from left to right. And here's exactly where it happened in my view. And then we can see where to go from here. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay. So what I feel like I could do is I'm gonna share this. This is really cool actually to hear this. And obviously I don't think much about it, but I'm gonna go over to. I think we'll get extra points from Catalyst if we use the Scientific Foundation website. What do you think?
Okay, that sound works for me.
Catalyst points in the bank. Ding, ding.
We need to talk about that, because I don't know what Catalyst points are about.
So he's been talking to us about this model, and as detangler, I spend a lot of my time on decoding, right, and providing that feedback. So I'm typically on the right. You're typically more on the sender encoder side.
Right.
So when you look at this, when you think of the word clarity, is it across the whole thing? Is it the channel? Is it encoding is what's clear? Where does clarity fit in this model?
That's a great question. It just from my observations.
So that right there is the representation of, now let's have a complex discussion using the Scientific Foundation visual, where we're standing on Shannon and Weaver's work, right? And now we're going to get a discussion about, is it decoding? Is it encoding? Is it the whole thing? Is it the feedback? Let's talk about these and parse through them. And now, if we went back to your visual, the 2x2, it's the, how do we get to that complex conversation using a simple visual, right?
So I think may I give my quick reaction? Because as I was watching that again, I started writing, like, what is that moment? And that's
Right.
what you just highlighted. There was the moment, you highlighted it out. What does it look like? Which you just showed us. Why is it so critical?
Right.
What I saw you do, maybe, now stop me if this is going too far into the how, but I just want to comment on what I saw you do, that in this context, how you asked a question, like you sort of introduced a scientific foundation site and asked Clarity a question to kind of bring him along in order to get him engaged in that visual. And it happened like in seconds. And then all of a sudden, like that's that like inflection, or is that the right word? That's that moment of the adaptation happening for you guys. And it was pulling it from, do you think it pulled it from mechanical to organic? Or do you think it?
I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I do know what I felt was we have so much, we spend so much time, Clarity and I do, in our domains, and we are tackling these issues that only we see. The reason why I went there was I felt the urge that we were leaving value on the table in our discussion because we didn't have something to talk about. In other words, we were talking at each other, but by putting a visual here, now both of us can talk about the visual, right? So there's a third element now. If it's just, you know, Clarity and I, we are just talking, and you're a bystander. But if we drop this on the table or on the screen, now Clarity and I both focus on a visual. Now, as the listener, you can too. So now we can get to a different level of shared understanding because we have this third element called a visual or an artifact or whatever. And now his job is to be clear about what he sees. My job is to be clear about what I see. But the reference is the visual. That's the Rosetta Stone between what we see that therefore can unlock something of greater value. Without it, I felt like we were leaving value on the table from a detangler. His time's valuable, my time's valuable. Why are we even on the call? I've done 85 of these things. Now we're doing a joint one. You know, do we just want to talk at each other, or do we want to, you know, bring something together, chocolate and peanut butter? How do we do that? Right? That was the specific selfish motive, because I wanted our listeners to see the value of Clarity detangler. Like I would want to have them see activating detangling together, chocolate and peanut butter, by listening to this one. You know?
Yeah,
and I can draw parallels. Like you
I'm
put
kind
the
of excited.
whiteboard.
I don't know what to say. I'm just kind of looking and listening to you. This is cool.
Well, it just happened with you and I. Like you put the whiteboard together. You brought the orb. You brought this 2x2 change thing. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. I'll improv with you. You're like, I'll improv with you. And we're like, let's just see where it goes. I'll bring these ingredients. I've got the Walter video. You've got your ingredients. Let's just see what happens. So you've activated me. I'm trying to get a point across that this idea of getting detangled and shared understanding involves meeting people where they're at somehow, bringing them through some sort of gray and fuzzy thing that usually is uncomfortable as fast as possible, and then getting some sort of shared understanding using the 2x2 on the screen. We could do that in a simple view, bottom left, and make it, you know, unicorns and rainbows, or we can tackle something about the ecosystem that's going to, you know, move the needle, right? And there's a lot of conversations in business today that are all unicorns and rainbows, and nobody's really tackling anything, and meetings are unproductive. So that's a bit of a, you know, moving forward as to why activating is important in your role, to get something out of somebody else that adds value.
So I think I'm really excited. I lost you for a second there. I don't know what's going to happen on the recording. You froze.
Sorry.
No, not your fault at all. It's technology. So if you can, because what I did here was, these were the notes we were just taking, and then you inspired something else. I was just gonna sort of whiteboard for us. You went through, I think, 3 steps.
Yeah, it's like meeting people where they are, getting through some sort of fuzzy awkwardness on the front end, creating some sort of, you know, bringing together convergence,
I hate
and
the
then
word convergence. Why do I hate that word? We're going to use it, but
bringing together something, and then moving forward together, right?
Yep. So,
and so the activating that you're doing is allowing me to do that. What I was saying that might have broken out was the why behind it is to have a right side conversation of this 2x2 grid. There are too many left side conversations that people don't solve anything. How do Clarity and I have a right side conversation? And it's hard to do that without this Shannon and Weaver model, which is why the scientific methods are important, scientific foundations.
is that fair to say right there what I just typed? Make sure. So this is a new way of doing our practice of, let me repeat back to make sure that I have an understanding of what you said. I typed it instead of saying it. So
oh, that's cool. Yeah. Because I think if today's detangler is about creating shared understanding, there's a likability, like, okay, fine, I like you. You know, that a lot of people on business focus on is we have shared understanding because we like each other.
Because
again,
I think, yeah.
You know,
that's right.
But there's a shared understanding of, hey, we're going to tackle an ecosystem challenge that is inherently different, and you can't really do that without some sort of tools or visuals and process. Back to the orb, you have to orchestrate it. People have to be locked in. The information exchange is different. It's a top right information exchange using the orb, and the process is different. We're in this idea of quote unquote getting out of the mud, you know, teaming, whatever, getting unstuck, and we're in this idea of using technology to help us whiteboard, you know, so that we get a shared understanding of these ecosystem issues.
I can't draw them out. So
yeah, and I don't know how to build a C slide from this, but I feel like we should build a C slide from this, but I don't know how to do. I probably, what you're doing is helpful, but like to me, I'm like, oh, this would be cool to have a C slide, but I don't really even know where to get started with that. And maybe it's because I'm yapping, you know, I'm talking too much. So this is helpful there. But what points would you like to summarize as we start winding down on our daily detangler?
Yeah, let's summarize. So we'll take sort of a next step approach in my mind, if that's okay, because you just brought something up, like, I'd like to make a C slide. I feel very activated right now to want to do something also, but we do have a time limit on detangler. So I think next steps might be for us to kind of process what we just did and maybe keep going on this afterwards, right? Like, and then come back together. But my summarization of this thing was, number one, we kicked it off with like the theme was, or the theme of this detangler was creating a shared understanding. So we started sort of setting here's what we're going to do. And we said, let's improv, as you said, and we did, we practiced a lot of things all at once. I think we started, as you said, which I think is very clear to me at this moment, that we did start in a responsive place, if you will, here, that we were responding to an ask, and we had two, things to react to. And then we did these bullet points over here, which we don't, maybe for next time I'll be better at bringing even more visuals, because as it netted out through these next two, the moment when you shared the video of you and Walter, and we talked about that moment that happened where the visual, the image together that you were both able to get to was super critical, because it helped both of you and also any listeners be in a more common place to get to that, to at least be on the path together toward that shared understanding. That's what I see. So I think using this thing, this prototype of a model here, through this process together, just role playing it, we scratched the surface, kind of made a little checklist here without even exactly trying. I do think that you and I together sort of, maybe, I'm seeing it, that we moved more into an organic space here. I think we went to performance, perhaps.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think the key that you called out and you had a, you followed your gut on was the adaptations, right? Like we're adapting to one another and also using the visuals to help us adapt the conversation to create basically two situations. The first situation was, hey, how do we figure out how to make sense of all these dots we have to connect? And then we're just going to start doing. And then the second situation is now, how do we relate this idea of kind of chocolate peanut butter activating and detangling together to help people see why scientific foundations are important to build off of, but also, help create something relatable that perhaps they can use in their own, work to relate to each other on our team. What if we could use this type of approach that we just used to help us kick off meetings? Like if we go back to the stuck in the mud discussion, what if we used these tools in our stuck in the mud?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think we should try that, because I was talking to Catalyst, and it's like, he challenged me. He's like, hey, so we all got stuck in the mud, and I guess we're just going to keep, basically we're just going to forget that happened, or what are we doing with that? I'm like, good question. I guess, I just moved on to Kinefin models or whatever they're called. Maybe we should go I think we're still stuck in the mud back there. Maybe we should go try to get unstuck again. And maybe these are two ways or three, an approach to help us create shared understanding, right? Maybe, possibly, I don't know. But I don't think we had shared understanding on the stuck in the mud challenge.
I will agree with you on that. I think we're on to something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that just popped into my head, because the idea of adaptation, it's interesting. In the 80s and 90s, we used to think a meeting was about a moment in time, about one thing for an hour. But what we just are seeing in 20 minutes, we've adapted in a 20-minute span across a couple of things here, that the meeting is really a container for collaboration. We don't know what's going to happen in the meeting if we do it right. So the idea of coming together has dramatically changed, in the last 20 years. I remember I used to have meetings about projects, and it was like, we're just going to talk about the project and go through all the rows. That's a very bottom left view of a meeting. But if you say, look, we're coming together, this is a $500 meeting, our time is valuable. Why are we actually meeting in the first place? What are we doing? That's a whole different perspective of this idea of a meeting. And I think this approach might help us with that.
Awesome. Love it. I'm on board.
Awesome. Let's try it.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Activator. I feel activated. Do you feel detangled?
I think this was a really fun mashup between detangler and activator.
I'm going to ask at the end of every meeting if people feel detangled.
Do you feel detangled? Well, I'm just going to challenge you back. What does it feel like to feel detangled? I think we need to make another episode about that.
Yeah.
What does it even feel like to be detangled? I do feel. Here's what I can say. I don't feel tangled.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, so that must mean that I'm detangled. Yeah.
Or you're freed up, not locked up, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's great.
Okay, that's good. That works for me.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for your time.
You had a perfect opportunity to hit me back with, what does it feel like to be activated? We probably need to, we should collaborate next time on that.
I did leave you off the hook. I thought about it, but I chose not to. Because I think you can tell. Well, I hope you can tell, because my energy level and everything else, I have energy level and excitement. And then also we took action. Also, I did explain a little bit about how you brought your ingredients here to help me plug into, right? You made it easier for me to collaborate here in an organic way, which to me, those are things about activation that you do really well. Like, you reminded us about improv at the beginning. So that, and we went through the rules of improv, stuff like that. You know, I don't go into a meeting thinking about the rules of improv. I have a blind spot there. So that was super helpful.
How did it feel? I mean, did it feel uncomfortable, or did it feel easy? Or someone
that was easy. I think I mean, I think I did the rules okay. I don't think I blocked any free-flowing ideas. So I think I did it well there. It
But
wasn't
being
too
on
awkward.
stage, I think it was a successful scene. It might be interesting to get the audience's point of view. What would they score?
Yeah. Yeah, they may have got up and left. They may have got up and left already.
It's possible. It's possible. We're kind of doing the what do they call it? The
yeah.
Not the encore, but it's the extended director's cut right now.
Yeah, right. Maybe we should let them go.
Yes, yes.
If you've hung in here this long.
Yeah, thank you for having me on your detangler today. I'm excited
Thanks for coming.
To hear what the audience thinks and to keep going forward on this. Momentum. We got some momentum here, so let's keep it rolling. Thank you.
All righty. Take care. See you, everybody.